there was many people, myself included, who saw that the ceiling for that Santa Clara team was really high, but we also saw that the floor was could also have some lows. And I think they were one of the more not to say up and down teams, but they were from night to night, as you mentioned, like Jekyll and Hyde, that when they were good, they were maybe amongst the best on the entire West Coast. But when they were bad, those turnovers just ended up being so costly, time in, time out over the course of the season. Now, this is a team that is going to bring back a lot of that team as there's some continuity going into this coming year. How do you think like this team is going to be able to kind of adjust under really kind of year two of this solid group under Herb Sendek and kind of grow? Because clearly there were some probably fixable mistakes that you can take into going in the next year.
I think the best part about what you just mentioned is you get a rare type of continuity right now at Santa Clara. One of the few teams I would argue in the country that just hasn't gotten ramrodded by at least the first wave of the transfer portal. For Santa Clara last year, their big issue was consistent shot creation and consistent dribble penetration. We mentioned the turnovers. We mentioned that we're on the smaller side of like guard height and guard width and guard measurements in the WCC and really in the country. For as tall as Santa Clara was in the front court with Johnny O'Neal, Christoph Tilly, Francisco Caffaro, having Brent Napper, Jalen Benjamin as your lead guards led to some physicality issues in some matchups. I notably think of St. Mary's. They're a team that just winds you down, grinds you down, doesn't matter who you are. And Santa Clara wasn't ready for that type of matchup yet. Whereas at other matchups against like Pepperdine and against Pacific, yeah, they did what they had to do. But having that consistent shot creation against a variation of opponents is what Santa Clara is going to need to take the next step going into next year.
And we saw some of that. We knew that Adama Ball was that guy, but he got banged up in the middle of conference play. And even once he came back, he really didn't look like himself until probably a few weeks into his return. But you mentioned like that dribble penetration. One of the guys who does come in from the transfer portal, a very familiar face for Broncos fans, Carlos Stewart, comes back. I was talking with someone that I got almost half confused. I double-taked on the announcement that Carlos Stewart was coming back and almost confused him with Carlos Marshall and had to kind of focus on, oh, wait, it's Carlos Stewart coming back. And obviously we know the performer that he was, and kind of talk about just what he means coming back into the fold, because obviously that's a guy we know has the potential to be an all-league performer.
Yeah, I look at Carlos Stewart and I was having a big grin on my face when I heard that, because I had heard the day before he had actually committed and stuff. I had heard he was back on campus. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. The fact that not only one, he was interested, but also the fact that the coaches in the program are willing to receive him back, because that's not always a two-way street on that front. So to hear that, of everything going around that, okay, Carlos Stewart is back. This is clearly a move that they mean business for in terms of continuing to improve the program. I think of his time at least his first stint on the Mission campus, as he didn't know anything but to go 100% and 100 miles an hour every single second of every single game. And there's some good and bad with that. Carlos Stewart, against teams that he was more athletic than, he would just blow by, and he has some underrated athleticism that you don't think he has. And then there, lo and behold, he's posterizing your center, just putting him into Narnia. Other times he's good off the dribble and pulling up into the mid-range, kind of like how Jamal Murray stops on a dime, pulling up from the elbow, was improving his three-point shot, but in some cases was too fast for his own good, not poised enough to see the floor and just take stock of what he was seeing in terms of just turning the corner, in terms of finding the roll man and things like that. And for me, that's what I want to see from him into this second stint here at Santa Clara. Can he prove that the game has slowed down enough for him to where he can not only be the Energizer Bunny that he was on the floor when he was here the first time, but also help his teammates out in the same vein and keep the offense free-flowing as it was these past few years?
I mean, one of the things that, again, kind of we talk about, like progression and his growth. This is a Santa Clara team that's going to be a little on the older side going into next year, which I think is going to benefit them. And again, we talk about that continuity. If you looked around the conference, the teams that largely did better were the teams that were a little bit more, had that continuity across the board. Now, again, maybe last year was a little bit more. It was St. Mary's who had largely that continuity, where they brought back, I think it was like 7 of their top 9 players. And that is not the case this year. Gonzaga kind of has that. Santa Clara has that. USF to an extent has that. So it does feel like to me that it's like going in, that expectations probably are going to be a little higher because of that continuity. You can hit the ground running a little bit more. Even though you bring back Carlos Stewart, who may not be familiar with the current cast of characters at Santa Clara, this is a guy who's familiar with the system. He knows what Coach Sendek wants to do. Like this is a guy who kind of like fits in. He knows how he's going to fit kind of in that system and where he kind of needs, what role he needs to play.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about it, but Santa Clara at minimum should finish top 3 in the WCC next year. And if you had told any Santa Clara fan a decade ago of that type of expectation, they'd probably laugh at you in the face and say, what do you want? And I sit here thinking it's kind of crazy myself to look at it like that. Coming into being a student at Santa Clara, I wasn't expecting them to be this type of program. I certainly didn't expect Jalen Williams to take the leap that he did from up until the draft night. I didn't expect the leap that Brandon Pajimski. We didn't even know him as a person yet. He was still on the bench at Illinois when I was entering my years at Santa Clara. It's so many different dynamics have changed for the Broncos and that coaching staff in this program that it feels like a little bit of a, what type of house money are you playing with now that you are expecting a top 3 finish in the WCC? Can you tap on the door of the top 2? Can you split games, win one at home against St. Mary's, and it's okay if you drop one in Moraga? Same thing with Gonzaga. Can you find a way to do that consistently for years on end, continue to build your brand, continue to win in the conference without shooting yourselves in the foot and out of league games, and maybe just one day do enough to where you get your name called on Selection Sunday?